I'm Sam McConney,
And I'm Ryan Stewart.
and the club we chose for our case study was the UMD Rugby Club.
The University of Minnesota Duluth offers a wide range of clubs and organizations. One club that has prestigious achievement is the Duluth Men's Rugby Football Club. For the past few years, they have received huge amounts of attention from the USA Rugby and serious D2 rugby schools. Also, the Duluth Men's Rugby Football Club for the past few years has even gone all the way to nationals, and this year they brought back a national title. Needless to say, the Duluth men's rugby team is a growing club in Duluth and is receiving much attention in Duluth and nationally.
Over the course of the semester, our class has been reading and discussing 3 books. Each author seems to have a few main concepts that they each emphasize in their respective books regarding education. In fact, several of the concepts are common among more than just one author.
One book we read is called Finnish Lessons: What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland by Pasi Sahlberg, a former teacher, educator of teachers, policymaker, and overall expert on education from Finland. In his book, he explores the educational reform that has occurred in Finland over the past several decades that has taken Finland from being an internationally mediocre education nation to having one of the most renowned education systems in the world.
A second book we read by Julia Williams was called Jewels on Schools, Teaching, Learning, and Everything in Between. Williams is currently a professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth, holds a degree in many areas of education involving a PhD in educational leadership, and is also a mother of 6 children. In her book, she explores different areas of education, especially at the elementary level, and just about everything that could go along with that. The last book we read was called The Teaching Mountains: How Cognitive Science Can Save Our Schools by Roger Schenck. Schenck is a former professor of several prestigious universities, a founder of many educational programs and institutions, and holds a PhD from the University of Texas in linguistics. In his book, he emphasizes the importance of cognitive learning and the ways in which our current education system is moving in the wrong direction.
One concept Sahlberg discussed in his book is the importance of collaboration between teachers that goes on in Finnish schools. Sahlberg states, teachers' work should strike a balance between classroom teaching and collaboration with other professionals in the school. Finnish teachers spend a lot less time in the classroom instructing students than teachers in the United States do. But when they're not teaching, much time is spent getting together with one another to discuss what concepts seem to be working in educating their students, which usually amounts to about 2 hours a week. In this way, it serves as almost a continued education for these teachers because they are continually learning new tactics for teaching their students. This concept is not really emphasized in the United States. The concept of collaboration has been important to Finland because it shows the collective effort of staffs and the nation altogether to share teaching styles that have proven successful in educating students. This concept of collaboration is strongly utilized by members of the rugby club. It is quite common for members to be new to the team and new to rugby in general when they first start. Therefore, it is up to coaches and teammates to help each other learn rules and techniques to improve each other's level of play, especially for the newest members. Sure, members of the team may somewhat be competing for playing time, but in the interest of improving the team as a whole, everyone is willing to help one another out to learn successful strategy and technique in order to make the team better together. This collective effort of collaboration is critical for any sports team that hopes to see holistic improvement of the team. When it comes to improving the collaboration of the rugby club, it is hard to do since everyone on the team helps each other learn the game. But like any club or sports team, it is not uncommon for players and coaches to focus more on the starting players or players that are more experienced instead of the newer players. This doesn't mean that players don't help the non-stars, but it's true. It is said that starters are usually the ones who practice more plays and receive more attention. With this, the starters are the ones receiving more collaboration rather than bench players. In order for a rugby team to really become successful, it can be argued that both players and bench players need to practice. With that comes the collaboration and criticism that helps make a team better together.
Another interesting and really quite impressive concept explored by Sahlberg in his book is the ability of Finland to be the best education system in the world without the contribution of excessive funding towards education. In fact, Finland has a smaller percentage contribution of their GDP 5.6% to education than the average OECD nation at 5.7%. and a decent amount less than the United States, whose education spending makes up for 7.6% of their GDP. Yet they are blowing these countries out of the water on PISA tests. Now, from the standpoint of the U.S., spending significant money on education shouldn't necessarily be considered a bad thing. After all, education is very important, but the United States needs to examine their spending and say, hey, despite all the money we're throwing at this, what is preventing us from attaining better education? Williams also discusses funding from a different perspective when she says, I do believe there are such things as too many expectations, funding spread too thin, and staffs at the breaking point. Despite the fact that the U.S. spends a comparatively high amount on education, maybe Williams has experience working in schools that have been unproportionately funded to fulfill their needs and expectations of them. As exemplified by the recent national championship by the UMD Rugby Club, they too exemplify Sahlberg's idea of excellence with the necessity of high funding. In fact, unfortunately at UMD, the sports club program is actually quite underfunded. Along the lines of what Williams says, many of the clubs are having to make do on quite limited funds, meaning students are having to pay for a lot of the expenses in order to participate in the club, and funds are usually tight for college students. Currently, among all the sport clubs here at UMD, there is a competition for a pot of money that has been accumulated over the course of the semester that clubs try to earn points towards in order to win the pot. It is hard to argue that a sports club that has just won a national championship could use its funds to strive for excellence in a better way. But maybe it should be up to the UMD Sports Club's program to attempt to get more funding from the school to take some of the burden off of the college students for the various expenses they must pay. Possibly for the rugby club, they could look at ways in which they could use their funds more efficiently and cut costs, but other than that, they seem to be getting along with just fine at the moment with their allotted funds.
A third big concept, one presented by Shank, is the benefits of hands-on learning. In his book, he even uses the example of football coaching and compares it to a teacher. His argument is that teaching is all about telling students facts. On the contrary, football coaching is all about doing, and Shank says a coach needs players who can execute. Learning facts is a conscious activity, he would argue, whereas running through actual plays on a football field takes place in the subconscious, and therefore has a much better chance of being remembered. Learning by doing has a much better chance of being retained than simply learning facts. Sahlberg also brings up the importance of a more applicable type of learning. He claims that in math education in Finland, they try to link what they are doing to more real-world situations by focusing more on problem-solving type questions. Therefore, instead of just teaching the concepts in a factual manner, the students are forced to learn on a deeper level because they're actually using concepts in an applicable situation. Rugby also follows this concept of hands-on learning through their emphasis on practice. They spend a majority of the time on the field actually running through plays, scrimmaging, and doing, instead of sitting in a locker room or classroom somewhere and learning about the rules or learning about plays that they will be expected to execute on the field. That way, when particular game situations occur, instead of just having been told how to execute, they physically know how to execute in order to react to what is going on. The rugby club could improve hands-on learning by allowing more players who are new to the game to see more real playing time. Unfortunately, like any competitive team, players who have more experience and are better than other players will more likely see more playing time. This goes against hands-on learning for new players who watch the game being played on the sidelines.
One concept that Shank talks about in his book is how we must not simply follow exactly what our teachers and masters do, and instead use cognitive thought and our abilities in order to develop as an intellectual being. Shank says that there is an unspoken rule at places like my university, that if you are really good, you do exactly what your teacher does. If every student followed exactly what their teachers and professors did, then there would be no real-world applications and no cognitive thinking being taught. Without any cognitive thought on your own part, you aren't really learning, just simply following orders. Shank argues that schools should change their style of learning to more cognitive-based thought and more experimentation in order to help students with real learning and help with the outside world. Rugby also follows the ideas of how one must not simply follow what their teachers or masters do, and instead use cognitive thought in order to develop as an intellectual being by developing as a player and using cognitive thought on the pitch. Each player has their strengths and weaknesses, and it would be foolish to follow exactly what a coach or a master does because he has different strengths and weaknesses. Instead, a teacher or coach should instruct his students or players to play that relate back to his strengths or weaknesses instead of his own strengths and weaknesses. A way the rugby team can focus more on using the ideas of not doing exactly what your teacher or coach exactly does is analyzing themselves on and off the field and look at their strengths themselves and focus on those rather than relying on the coach. Part of being a good player and a good student is analyzing yourself and focusing on your own weaknesses.
The final concept that we are going to discuss is the importance of goals. Shank states that learning begins with a goal, and later goes on into detail how everything we do as humans is goal-directed. Shank later again states how if schools focused on the goals that children actually had, that they were working on at the very moment that they entered school, school would seem like a natural, helpful experience. These statements are important when it comes to the education system. Most students already know their goals and will not put in time and work when it comes to work that can't be related back to their goals. That said, it is important to base a school's curriculum and work on students' goals. The rugby team can show this concept in many different ways, but the big one was the national championship. We mentioned how last spring the Duluth Rugby team lost the national championship and how the team was brokenhearted from losing. When the fall season began, the team made a clear goal: come back and win the national championship. This was everybody's goal, and this goal related back to everyone's interest, and it was something that they were passionate about. Because of this goal, the team showed tremendous amounts of conditioning and work as well on the field and off the field, in play and strategizing. One way the team can benefit from this concept now is through making new goals. Now that the team has won a national championship, it can be hard to find a harder goal. But in order for the club to strive, the club needs to look for new goals so that they can find a new focus and become a stronger and more successful club. Some suggestions of some new goals would be to look for new recruits, focus on giving back to the community, and working in the classroom for every athlete. These ideas are personal ideas and also come from the Duluth Rugby Club motto.
It was interesting digging into how the rugby club has utilized some of the major educational concepts brought up by the three experts in these books. The five that we emphasized were Sahlberg's concept of collaboration, Williams and Sahlberg's idea of making do with low funding, Shank's emphasis on the benefits of hands-on learning, Shank's idea of individual cognitive development, and the importance of goals that is brought up by Shank.
Though there will always be room for improvement, overall the rugby club seems to be doing an excellent job of utilizing the educational concepts of these three authors, as exemplified by their recent national championship. We hope you enjoyed our presentation, and thanks for watching.